America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it, and really get it into their heart. And this, the way Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days, we need it more than ever. And Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
Today we're talking about strength, personal strength. What makes you so strong? And I have with me a good friend all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, the Reverend Dr. Dwight D. Andrews. Thank you so much for being with me.
It's great to be with you, Nick.
Yeah, you've put up with me for the last several weeks, and I'm just delighted that you could be a part of this show. But today I want to talk about Samson. And the question that Delilah raises to Samson is simply, what makes you so strong? Now, maybe there's somebody looking at this right now who say, well, I don't really know that story. So let me share with you a little bit about the Samson and Delilah story. We see in Judges chapter 16 that there is a man and a woman. They have a son. They name him Samson. And they decide that they're going to raise their son in a God-fearing way. They dedicate his life to be a Nazarite. And the Nazarites were very spiritual people. They took an oath of spirituality. They had their own guidelines, strict guidelines, diet in terms of what to eat, what not to eat. And one of the things that they decided was that they would never handle anything dead. So if there's a dead animal around them, they would not handle it. And on top of all that, they were to keep their lives circumspect. And so Samson is raised in this fashion, and the outward manifestation of him being a Nazarite was that his parents never cut his hair. And so Samson had hair all down. I don't know if his hair, Dwight, was flowing down or if he had nappy, bushy hair. But
he had a lot of hair.
He had a lot of hair. And Samson does well until he comes of age. Now, he becomes what's known in Israelite history as a judge. And the judges were people who could lead an ordinary life. They might be farmers. They might be doctors. They may be educators. But in times of national crises, the judge would call all people together. And Samson was unique in that Samson was physically very strong. He was just an unusually strong person. And you combine this unusual personal physical strength with what I imagine was a deep inner spirituality, a deep inner emotional strength. And he had a magnetic personality. He was the kind of person who could draw a loosely assembled group of people who maybe, back then Israel didn't have an army, they didn't have a king, but what they had was a series of judges. And so Samson, it becomes a judge. Deborah, a female judge. You had Samuel, a judge. He's the last judge. But Samson was unique in that he was unique because of his personal strength. And the enemies of Israel were terrified of Samson because nobody could defeat him. And so it's ironic that this man who could not be defeated was brought down by a woman. And the Bible tells us in Judges 16 that Samson started, frequenting and frolicking and fraternizing with the women of the land and with prostitutes and with loose women, women of harlotry. And, rather than be like his father and his mother and just get married and settle down, Samson, I think, maybe let his muscles go to his head. And he goes buck wild. And just to paint the story, in case somebody doesn't know it, Samson goes through all these women until he meets a woman named Delilah. And Delilah is a Philistine. And Samson thinks that Delilah loves him. And I'm sure she sweet-talked him. I'm sure Delilah probably told him, Samson, I've seen a lot of big men, but nobody's as big as you. Samson, I've seen men with big muscles, big biceps, big shoulders, big chests, big calves, big feet. But I've never seen any man as big as you. And I think it all went to Samson's head, Dwight. I think I can see him right now saying, who's your daddy now? I'm the big man. And Delilah just went on and on. And they were lovers. They played games. And in playing games with each other, one of the games that they played was Delilah would say, Samson, what makes you so strong? And Samson would tell her a lie. He didn't tell her that his strength was really in his hair. And I'm not so sure, Dwight, that the strength was the hair, but I think it's what the hair represented. The hair represented his vows to God. And he wouldn't tell her that. He'd say, if you tell me to do this and do that, I'll be like any other man. And 2 times they do this. They go through this little ritual, and when he would, she would do what he told her would make him weak, she would shout at him and say, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And then all of a sudden, men would jump out of the curtains. And I'd say, who wants a girlfriend like that? Who wants a girlfriend who's going to play a life or death game with you? And they go back and forth between, she'd say, what makes you so strong? And he'd say, if you do this, you do that, I'll be like any other man. Well, finally, the Bible tells us she finds him, she asked that question that third time, and she says, what makes you so strong? And this time, he's lying down with his head in his lap. I think all Samson wanted to do was to kiss her. All he wanted to do was to have fun with her. But he doesn't realize that she is an agent of the Philistines. He doesn't, and she's been threatened by the Philistines, the army. They know that Samson has been visiting her. And so that third time when she says, what makes you so strong? he says, okay, I'll tell you. My strength is in my hair. And if you cut my hair, I'll be like any ordinary man. And sure enough, while he's asleep on her lap, she cuts his hair, and then she shouts out at him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And once again, like a vaudeville, except this is life or death. Like a vaudeville. These men open up the curtains, they run out with swords, and what do? They poke his eyes out. They blind the brother. And they not only do they blind him, they bind him with ropes. And he can't break the ropes this time. And they drag him into slavery. And it has a great ending, in that he prays to God, and eventually he gets his strength back and he kills his enemies. But I want to get your reaction to this lover's game between Delilah and Samson. Him being coy with her, not telling her that he really is a faithful person. And what does that really mean? And any other thoughts that you have from the Samson and Delilah story?
Well, my first thought is that you telling that story makes me want to read it all over again. I was wondering how this would not be an X-rated segment, because
I had to really struggle with that.
Yeah, it's a pretty racy story in many ways. But when you characterize Samson as being a player, he had many relationships with many women, and then ultimately Delilah plays him. So Delilah becomes the player who plays the one who was the player. So the player got played by Delilah. But I think it's a really a dense story because of the many levels of representation of his being devout, as a servant of God, but also he was very human in his dalliances. So even though he may have been raised in a very religious way, he was also prone to all of the temptations that all of us are. But that's one of the stories that I've always struggled with, because I'm never sure of what the lesson is. And so that's why I was looking forward to having this conversation with you, because I'm not sure what the story around strength is. And is in losing his hair, is his strength really taken, or does he lose it because he believed his strength was in his hair, rather than his strength being in his hair? So I'm not the theologian, but I certainly could listen to you tell that story 1,000 times.
Well, Dwight, we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this question: what makes you so strong? Friends, stick around, and we'll be right back.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
There are people all across this globe who now will have the opportunity to know you like I do, because of course you are very forthcoming in telling stories about life, stories that are relatable, and that means something. How wonderful it is, and I just look forward to seeing how this new platform will just rise and grow and really be a vessel through which you can be a blessing to folk all over this world, and Lord knows we need it.
Again, Thanks for sticking around with us. This is the Nick Hood Ministry program, and I thank you for being part of this. We're talking about Samson and Delilah, and her question to Samson, what makes you so strong? And, you know, Delilah raised that question to Samson, what makes you so strong? Because he undeniably was probably this big muscle-bound guy. But the converse of that is that sometimes, more often than not, I think, you know, in our day, somebody will raise the question in another way. It won't be what makes you so strong, but is it, why are you so weak? You know, at what point will you man up? That's an expression. People say, man up, be a man. And to the women, they say, if you're a woman, put on your big girl dress.
Right,
you know, I didn't want to say what they're really saying, but I've heard people say that. Lady told me that, a business lady. She said, you know, her business had some challenges, and she said I had to put on my big girl dress or whatever, underwear. And but in the case of Samson, you raised the question at the end of the first segment that was it really that the strength was in his hair, or that he just believed that it was? And, you know, all these years later, it's hard for us to know. But to me, it seems like the hair was symbolic. It was symbolic of the vows of commitment to God that Samson not only made himself, but that his mother and his father made for him. Think about what that means for your parents to dedicate you to God. Now, later in the book of Judges, and actually 1 Samuel, what we learn is Samuel, as the last judge, like Samson, was dedicated to God. His mother could not get pregnant, and she prayed to God and said, if you give me a son, I will dedicate him back to you. I will give him to you. And that's an amazing promise for a mother to make. And in the case of Samson, it was the mother and the father who made that dedication of Samson to God. And so when you think about Delilah, you know, pestering him until he finally gets weak and tells her the truth. John Hill, who's with us at this taping, said, you know, some people don't call her Delilah, they call her Deliah. I had never heard that one before, Brother John, but thank you very much for your theology according to John Hill. But Dwight, give me some other perspectives of Samson and Delilah. What jumps out at you?
What jumps out at me is the question of when Delilah poses, you know, the question to Samson, what makes him strong? It makes me want to think about, what does it mean to be strong? And obviously Samson, according to Scripture, was, you know, built, strong physique and everything. But is that really where his strength lied, or did it lie in the devout nature of his calling, his dedication? And it also makes me ask the question, what makes us strong? When we see ourselves as strong, what does that mean? Is it a physical reality, or is there something else when we talk about what makes a person a strong person? I oftentimes think of the strongest people I know as people that it has nothing to do with their physique or their physical being. It has to do with their resilience or their commitment of being able to stick to something and not be deterred by all of the distractions. And so I always concentrate on understanding strength in a way, Nick, that takes me away from the physical symbolism to more of the interior. What makes for a strong, faithful person? It's their ability to endure and to continue to see the best or see the way forward in spite of all of the obstacles. And so oftentimes the strongest people I know are the least physically impressive, but they have a strong heart, a strong will, strong mind, strong spirit. And that's what makes them strong.
I would agree with you, and I believe that one of the benefits of living a Christian life, one of the benefits of giving your life to Christ is that Jesus will show you how to be strong. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as you said, the strongest people are not necessarily people who are physically strong. I've seen physically strong, physically grown, big grown men, mm-hmm. Weak as a lamb. Mm-hmm. And by the same token, I've seen some very demure, petite women who just, walked and talked with force. Mm-hmm. And I believe it is really the confidence that Jesus gives us. Mm-hmm. I'm not bragging, but I want to tell you the truth. I buried my mother. I buried my father. I buried my sister. I buried my 2 brothers. I am the last man standing in my nuclear family. Mm. And now my wife is sick. And I started thinking about it, and I said, well, what makes you so strong, Nick? Why is it you think you can deal with this? But the reality is that I believe that I'm a living example of a combination of a spirituality that was formed when I was a child. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, not only do I have this spiritual base that started before I knew who I was, but in addition to that, I'm living life's experience. Mm-hmm. And the longer we live, the more we're going to see people get sick. And not just any old person, but people who are close to us. Mm-hmm. The longer you live, the more you have to deal with death. The longer you live, the more you have to deal with family members who go to prison. Mm-hmm. The longer you live, the more you have to deal with people who go bankrupt. The longer you live, the more you deal and have to deal with divorce. Not necessarily your divorce, maybe your divorce, mm-hmm. but you have to deal with somebody's divorce. Mm-hmm. And it is all part of the life cycle. And what I found is that Jesus Christ has given me a balance. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ has shown me a perspective that says you can make it. Mm-hmm. You can live through this. Mm-hmm. You can thrive as you go through this, whatever your struggle might be. And I would just say that I bet you there's somebody looking at this program right now who's trying to figure out, Reverend, that sounds all well and good, but I'm in a tough way. Mm-hmm. Reverend, my back is up against the wall. And Reverend, I can't see my way out of this thing. But I'm here to give you good news. And the good news today is that Jesus Christ died that you might have life everlasting. Jesus Christ came to earth that you might figure out how to live a worthwhile, meaningful, abundant, well-placed life. And Jesus is no respecter of persons, which means you may think that nobody knows who you are. But right now, looking at this broadcast ministry, I think I was brought by God to show you the good news of Christ. And what is that good news? The good news is that Jesus is with you. Jesus will show you a way out. And once you have made your way out, Jesus has prepared life everlasting in that kingdom which has no end. And Reverend Andrews, you pastor a major church in Atlanta. What's the hope that you give your members in terms of strengthening themselves when they don't feel strong?
Well, you've given a very powerful testimony through your own life, and I think as a pastor, we all try to provide living examples of strength, and I think you have given us a clear example. But I think what we are all trying to do is to literally show people that even when you think there is no hope, that through faith and through belief in Christ, there is always hope. And there's hope in the midst of illness. There's hope in the midst of dying and suffering. There's hope even in our own struggles with life and death. But I think if we trust that spiritual foundation and what Jesus promises, if we can find our way to that, I think that we can have the strength that God gives us to not just survive, but to thrive.
When I think about Samson, I think of somebody who may have gotten to the point where he took his strength for granted. Mm-hmm. And one of my fears in life is I never want to get to the point where I take my gifts for granted. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one thing to sit on this program and talk with you, but the reality is that no matter who you are, you can lose your mind. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, my father got to the point, who you knew and loved, my father got to the point where he wouldn't speak in public. I said, Dad, why won't you show up for you show up for a funeral of a friend of yours, but you won't say anything? He said, Nick, I know too many people my age, and he's about 90 then. He said, I know too many people my age who get up in front of a microphone and they don't know who they are. And so he said, I don't want that to happen to me. You know, I want people to remember me as I was. Mm-hmm. That being all well and good, I just want to say that we're about out of time. But I want to thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
And the last 4 weeks, you've been with me. And I think it's been great. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to do this again. And to those of you who are watching this program, remember, I'm praying for you. I need your support. If you can write a tax-deductible check to Nick Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201. I believe there's a blessing waiting for you. God bless, God keep you, and remember, I'm praying for you.
This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.